Hi there, Amanda here, and welcome to the video series How to Create a Somatic Movement Practice, Part 2. So in yesterday's video, if you haven't seen that, you can catch that. I'll put the link in the description box to this video. In yesterday's video, I explained how David and I approached our teaching practice of practices of Nia and aerial yoga after we had trained in somatics, and how it started to change how we approached movement and how we approached teaching movement too. And as promised, I said that today I would talk about how our aerial yoga teaching really changed quite a lot and how we actually changed some of the movements. And this is what I'm going to show you today. So let's start by looking at some of the things, or one of the things in particular, that we used to teach quite regularly. So here we are with the fabric, and we used to teach lots of different yoga postures using the fabric for support. And one of the things that comes to mind for me when we used to teach this is a single leg posture. So we take one leg into the fabric, resting it on the back of the ankle. And one of the movements that we would do, and it wasn't a straight away, we'd have warmed up for sure, but one of the movements we used to do was not only a single leg forward fold, so from this position, folding the whole body forwards so that the whole of the back leg lengthens and through the buttocks and through the back of the body. Not only did we do that, but we would also allow the fabric to swing forwards, and some people would come into a standing split. Now, that's all very well and good if that's where your body can go. But what I saw is the majority of people used the momentum of the hammock and the use of gravity to take them much further than they ordinarily could go. And the danger here is that when we take the body faster and further than it wants to go, then we trigger off something called the stretch reflex. So the stretch reflex is an inbuilt reflex that's actually located in the spine. And how it works is, if we are engaging with a muscle and we are doing a movement that lengthens the muscle quicker than it's used to, and it goes into the movement further than it's intended to, then within the muscle spindles there are there's information. The neurology there is that it sends messages through to the spine that triggers off an automatic signal that actually creates the muscle to contract so that you don't go too far and you don't harm yourself. So there we are, wanting to stretch a muscle to lengthen, and we are creating quite often a reaction that pulls the muscle into contraction because we're going too far too quickly. So this is the nature of a stretch reflex, and often if you go off and do activity which you're not used to, the next day you wake up and go, oh my god, I'm so stiff and achy and I can hardly move. That's the stretch reflex that's happened, and it's caused your muscles to contract. Often that's what's happening. So what we do in somatics instead is something called pandiculation. Now, pandiculation works very differently, and I'm going to use a yoga belt to show you how. So say this is the optimum length of a muscle. Let's take the hamstring. But actually, for many people, especially what I found is runners, for instance, often have tight hamstrings. That means that some of that muscle is bunched up. So that's the muscle in its resting phase. The thing is, the brain thinks it's at rest at its full length. So if we go ahead and try and stretch it, what we're doing is we're adding force and we're pushing against our own inbuilt neurology. And as I said before, we can set off the stretch reflex and cause more harm or damage. So what we need to do is alert the brain to the fact that that's not really at full rest. And I mentioned this in the video yesterday. It's connected to the concept of do more of what you're already doing. And that is what pandiculation is, in that if you shorten that muscle, contract the muscle more than where it was already shortened before, then it informs the brain that is contraction. Now the brain knows it's contracted, it has the ability to release it. And if we take a nice slow release with awareness, then the likelihood is that we'll come to a slightly longer muscle than we started. But we're not pushing to release, we're simply letting go. Now we repeat that pandiculation a few more times after a rest. So we contract with conscious awareness, we release slowly with conscious awareness, sensing where the edge of that release is, and then we rest. This resting is really important. It's like a mini soma scan, allowing the brain to update where the length of the muscle is. Do that a few times and the muscle will return to its full optimal length without stretching. Yes, it is possible. So we built this into our aerial yoga movements, and instead of doing just a single leg forward fold or reaching forwards almost into split, we changed that, and here's what we did. So here we have one leg in the fabric, resting on the ankle. And if we've got tight hamstrings, if you've got a client or a student with tight hamstrings, often the knee will look like it's still bent and they won't feel that they can release that muscle fully. Now here's another little nugget of wisdom. When we are going in to deal with, say, the hamstring, it's never about one muscle. Your muscles don't really work independently in that way. It's a whole body event. So your hamstring is also connected to the whole back chain of muscles, the calf, the glutes, the lower back, the muscles around the backs of the shoulders, the muscles at the back of the neck. It's all connected. So keep that in mind as we go through the movement. So the first thing is, how we did it just then with the pretend muscle of the yoga strap, is that we contract the muscle. So it's a bit tight, let's tighten it even more. So using the fabric, using the hands on the fabric, we gently push into it enough to keep the fabric taut, and we draw the knee inwards towards the chest. Now you might find that at the same time you could arch the back a little. So the whole of the back chain is tightening. The hamstring, the calf, the lower back, and then slowly release from the lower back. Allow the leg to release. Draw the belly in. So now the front chain of muscles begins to shorten, including the quads. And the back chain is starting to lengthen. Just finding where that edge of movement is for yourself. Take a rest, take a pause. What can you let go of? What are you not needing to be holding on to? And then we'll do that movement again. So we draw the knee in, tighten through the hamstring, slightly arch the back, and then slowly release from center. Allow the lower back to release. Allow the belly to start drawing in. The leg will lengthen away. And you might find that there's a little bit more space to release out too, without pushing or forcing. Taking a pause again to sense the the new information and the new place that you've rested to. And we'll do that one more time. Contraction, drawing in, arching through the whole of the back, and then releasing, drawing belly in, shortening through the front body, and then letting go. Now here's the thing, at the end of that move I would then encourage students to stand on the spot just for a moment and notice what's different. What's different through the left leg, what's different from the left to the right? Is the weight different side to side? Does one leg feel longer than the other? So we're going back into that mini Soma scan to sense awareness, to notice the change. So there are all the tips that we were looking at from yesterday's video. They come into play in a movement sequence. So that was just one movement, one aerial yoga sequence that we started to change and adapt and play around with. We used a lot more traditional somatic movements that we brought in to use the hammock with as well, both at this height and also much lower to the ground. And consequently, as you can imagine, the nature of our classes totally changed. So I hope you've enjoyed looking at how we incorporated some of the tips that we were talking about in yesterday's video. And in tomorrow's video, I'm going to talk about the next stage that happened for us as we were creating a somatic movement practice. In that, we put together our own somatic movement teacher training based on things that we'd learned from our own somatics training, things that we'd learned from other movement trainings that we'd practiced along the way, and our joy and love of movement, so that people could take that training, teach classes from it, or use the information to do what we did with our aerial yoga and adapt and transform the movement practice that they already teach. So do tune into the next video, part 3. That will come out on Friday. And do let me know how you're finding the information in these videos and if it's of use and how you're using it and what do you notice. Thank you so much for watching today's video, part 2, and I'll see you in the next one.